I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. I was halfway through stirring my third coffee of the morning when she appeared at the counter, her coat draped over one arm like she just shrugged off the day. The smell of brewed beans and warm pastries clung to the air, but it was her presence that made the cafe feel like a private room. "Double espresso?" she asked. Her voice was low, measured but not indifferent, just precise, like she'd noticed the small details without needing to be told. I nodded, a little startled. "Yeah, thanks." My hands hovered over my cup a second too long, tapping the spoon against the porcelain. She gave a soft, almost imperceptible smile, then turned back to the register. I took the usual corner table, the one by the window. Rain was starting to dot the glass in uneven patterns, a slow rhythm that made me aware of the quiet around me. The cafe wasn't empty, but it felt suspended, as if time had paused just for us. I watched her from the corner of my eye as she moved, hands brushing the countertop, shifting weight from one foot to the other, folding a napkin once, twice with care. Tiny, domestic movements that somehow made her seem both untouchable and familiar. I'd been coming here for weeks, not just for coffee. Something in the way she held herself, the ease with strangers, the gentle way she laughed at the barista's bad joke, made me linger. I'd replay our brief exchanges in my head, sometimes imagining them stretched into conversations I never had the courage to start. When she finally brought my espresso over, she set it down with a nod. "You're usually more careful with the sugar, right?" Her eyes flicked to my hands as I stirred, as if reading a page in a book I hadn't meant anyone to see. I froze. She remembered. Of course she remembered. Yeah, habit," I said, trying to sound casual, but my fingers tightened around the cup. My thoughts paused, then drifted somewhere else entirely. Unsaved texts I'd written to her sat in drafts on my phone, unfinished sentences I couldn't bring myself to send. I looked up just in time to catch her glance again, eyes lingering, and something unspoken flickering in the briefest of smiles. A memory from last week crossed my mind, her laughing at a joke I'd made, a slight tilt of her head, that quiet way she made space for me without noticing. I wanted to say something, anything, but words failed me. "Thanks," I finally muttered. She inclined her head, paused, then walked back toward the register. I found myself tracking the rhythm of her steps, counting the seconds between her movements like it mattered. My chest felt strangely empty, not sad, not anxious, just tuned to her absence before she even left the room. When she turned to go, her coat swinging lightly, she paused at the door and glanced back. I wanted to meet her gaze, wanted to speak, but I only lifted my cup in a small, awkward acknowledgement. She smiled again, quick this time, almost as if she were apologizing for leaving. Then the bell above the door chimed and she was gone. I stared at the door long after, feeling the faint pull of something I didn't have words for. My phone buzzed on the table, a message from an unknown number. Hesitant, I picked it up. It was her. "I found something of yours here. Can we meet?" The words hovered over me, warm and unexpected, and I realized my pulse had been holding itself steady, waiting for this exact moment. I didn't know how to respond. I met her at the small park near the gallery, under the shaky awning of a closed cafe. She was holding a small canvas rolled carefully in brown paper, and when she saw me, her smile was hesitant, almost apologetic. "I think this fell out of your bag last week," she said, handing it over. Her fingers brushed mine for a moment. Just that, nothing more, but it left a tiny spark where the air should have been. I cleared my throat. "Thanks. I didn't even notice." She shrugged, folding her arms, and for a second, she just watched the rain run down the glass of the nearby cafe windows. "I always notice things," she said, quiet, almost to herself. Then she tilted her head, like she had to decide whether to share it or not. I used to paint too long ago. Not seriously, but enough that it mattered to me." Her voice carried no pride, no lament, just a fact gently offered. And for some reason, it felt like she was letting me peek at a room in her life that nobody else ever got to see. I imagined what it meant, that she'd had a life I'd never known, a softer, younger version of herself. We walked together along the wet pavement. I wanted to say something, anything, but I mostly just matched her pace, listening to the quiet rhythm of her steps. She laughed softly at a pigeon skidding along the puddles. I tried not to notice the way her hand lingered on the canvas, as if holding it made it part of her. You ever feel like people expect you to have it all figured out? She asked suddenly. Her words startled me. Though the question hung lightly, almost casual, I looked at her. Yeah, I admitted. Mostly that I'm pretending I do. My voice caught slightly. I wasn't sure if I should have said that, or if it made me seem smaller than I wanted to. There was a silence, not empty, but charged, like both of us were aware of something we weren't naming. I noticed a faint gold ring on her finger. She wasn't wearing a wedding band, but the ring suggested history, presence. The thought of what could never be, me, a 20-something with half a decade separating us, pressured the air between us. We stopped by a bench. She set the canvas down and offered me a thermos she'd brought. She asked. The aroma was delicate, comforting. I took the cup, warming my hands, feeling the heat seep in. We sat shoulder to shoulder, quiet, the city muffled around us. She hummed softly, arranging the cup beside her, and I found myself watching the slight crease near her eyes when she smiled. It was nothing dramatic, but everything. Then her hand brushed mine, deliberate, careful, just enough to anchor the moment. Not a touch that demanded anything, but a touch that meant everything we couldn't say. I caught my breath. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I thought, as we looked out over the slick streets. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She turned slightly toward me, a quiet, teasing lift of her brow, as if she knew exactly what she'd done, and I felt a weight settle in my chest. Light, heavy, impossible all at once. The rain didn't stop. Neither did the slow unfolding of something I didn't have words for yet. I didn't expect to see her at the gallery that afternoon. I had arrived early to check the lighting on my small exhibition, and there she was, leaning over the reception desk as if she belonged there, which she did, somehow, without claiming it. Hey, I said, voice softer than I intended. She looked up, startled, then smiled, half amusement, half something unreadable. I felt my chest tighten. Hey, she said. Pause. She shifted her weight, hands clasped loosely in front of her, a subtle barrier I hadn't noticed before. I wanted to step closer, wanted to bridge that invisible distance, but a tight knot of uncertainty held me back. Did she want this? Did she even notice me the way I noticed her? My fingers brushed against a stack of flyers, twisting them, pretending to be busy. I brought your canvas in, I said finally, words trailing. I realized she was studying my movements, noticing the pause before each word, the way my eyes flicked to hers and away too quickly. She didn't comment, just tilted her head, letting the silence speak. I walked her toward the small studio space in the back. Every step felt deliberate, slow, aware. The air smelled faintly of turpentine and old varnish. We were surrounded by work, by color, by the ordinary chaos of creation, but ordinary didn't exist anymore, not with her there. She lingered near the window, adjusting a light. I didn't mean to come in on your space, she said softly. You didn't, I replied, voice catching. My hands flexed to my sides. I wanted to reach for hers, just to feel the heat of her fingers against mine, but the thought stopped me mid-step. A friend of mine, another artist helping with setup, peeked in, looking confused. I felt my chest tighten again. Not anger, not embarrassment, just awareness. Presence. Almost done, he asked, eyes darting between us. I nodded quickly, and she offered a small, polite smile, folding her hands. And just like that, the moment felt thinner, fragile, easily broken. We moved back to the table near the window. Rain was drumming softly outside again. She handed me a brush I had dropped. Her fingers brushed mine. Again, a fraction of a second, but long enough. My pulse skipped. I caught her glance. Her lips parted slightly. Hesitation, thought, maybe even a question. I wanted to lean in, to close that space, to let everything unsaid spill into the silence between us. I wanted it, and I didn't. My throat tightened. Words caught somewhere in the middle of wanton fear. I looked away, pretending to examine a canvas, but I felt her eyes on me. I knew she wanted to ask, to say, to cross the line, but she didn't. The moment stretched. Fingers almost touched again. Breath caught. A step forward. And then, footsteps in the hall. A distant knock, the mundane intruding. We both recoiled slightly, a quiet retreat, hearts still hammering in shared awareness. I left with the canvas tucked under my arm, a lingering warmth in my chest that wouldn't go away. That near touch, near confession, near everything, it stayed with me. And I knew, somehow, it would haunt the Here's Part 4, in your Kitako style, keeping the male POV, quiet tension, and emotional nuance. I hadn't seen her in 3 days. Not at the gallery, not at the cafe, nowhere. My routines felt empty in ways I didn't realize were anchored to her presence. The thermos I kept in my bag went untouched. Coffee sat cold on the counter, my thoughts looping over every half-smile, every brush of fingers that had lingered too long in my memory. She appeared without warning that evening, waiting on the edge of the park where we'd shared tea weeks before. The sky was gray, fading toward night, and the wet benches reflected the dull city lights. I approached cautiously, heart hammering. "I didn't think you'd come," I said. My words sounded weaker than I'd intended. I needed a walk," she murmured, hands tucked in her coat pockets. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, like she was carrying more than just the rain. We walked together in silence for a few minutes, each step tentative. I wanted to ask why she'd pulled back, why the warmth of our last conversation had cooled, but the words felt dangerous, too close to something we weren't ready to name. Finally, she stopped near a puddle, staring at the reflection of the streetlights. I can't," she said, voice low. "I shouldn't be doing this. With you. It's wrong." The words hit me in a quiet way, not shocking, just deep. Wrong. That one word carried the weight of years I wasn't a part of boundaries I had no right to cross. My chest tightened, and I realized how much I'd been holding in, every lingering glance, every imagined moment. "I don't know what I'm doing either," I admitted, the confession spilling before I could stop it. My fingers brushed against the strap of my bag, twisting it unconsciously. "But I keep thinking about you. About us, whatever that means." She flinched slightly, eyes dropping to the ground. "You shouldn't." A bird landed on a nearby railing. A moment of ordinary life passed between us, indifferent to the tension we carried. I wanted to take her hand, wanted to say, "I don't care if it's wrong," but something in the tilt of her head, the careful way she avoided my gaze, stopped me. "I keep imagining." I trailed off, the words hanging, unfinished. She looked at me then, and for a second, the wall she'd been holding up seemed thinner, almost absent. Her lips parted, and I could have sworn she was about to speak, or ask me to stop, but instead, she just inhaled sharply and looked away. The rain started again, soft, a rhythm that mirrored the quiet chaos between us. She shifted on the bench, pulling her coat tighter around her. I wanted to say something, do something, but all I could manage was to sit, the space between us charged and wide at the same time. Her voice came finally, almost a whisper. "Do you even know what this could mean?" I swallowed, unsure if the question was mine to answer, or hers. My thoughts spun around all the small moments, all the unsent messages, the near touches, the almost confessions. I felt exposed in a way I hadn't before, naked in quiet longing. I started but stopped. I didn't know if I should finish, didn't know if saying it aloud would shatter the fragile calm. And then she leaned slightly forward, just enough that I could feel her presence, her hesitation, and everything, the rain, the silence, the unspoken, hinged on a single fragile moment. Would she step closer, or would she walk away? I hadn't expected her at the cafe again. The bell over the door rang, but I barely looked up. I was already late for my own nerves. And then I saw her, hands folded over a leather-bound notebook, coat draped neatly over one arm. And something in her posture made my chest tighten. "Hey," I said. My voice cracked slightly, though I tried to mask it by stirring my coffee too vigorously. "Hi," she said, soft, measured but distant. The warmth of our last park conversation was gone, replaced by a careful reserve I hadn't noticed before. We talked in fragments, small sentences, interruptions that left more unsaid than spoken. She told me about a painting she was cataloging at the gallery, and I nodded, pretending to follow. But my mind kept drifting to the sharp edge I felt in her quiet, the distance she'd set between us without explanation. Then she mentioned her son, almost in passing, a half-smile on her lips. Ethan asked me to look at the exhibition last week, she said. My hand stilled. Ethan. I had known she had children, vaguely, but it had never come up in our direct conversations. I swallowed. Oh, was all I managed. My voice sounded thin, fragile. I didn't think it mattered before, she continued, but now I see you and him are friends. She didn't need to finish the sentence. The weight of it was clear. My chest tightened. I met Ethan at a party months ago, a casual hello, nothing that mattered, or so I thought. But she was watching me now, gauging, judging, and I realized the quiet, magnetic pull between us wasn't just complicated by age or unspoken attraction. It was layered with a life I hadn't accounted for. I tried to smile, but it faltered. Yeah, we know each other, I said, deliberately neutral. My hands fiddled with the spoon, tapping the edge of my cup, trying to anchor myself. The rest of our conversation floated on that thin edge, awkward laughter, pauses that stretched into seconds too long. I noticed the way she traced her finger along the notebook, the way her eyes kept darting to the door as if she might leave any moment. When she finally stood, she tucked the notebook under her arm. I should go, she said. No glance back, no lingering. Just the faint scent of her coat and the quiet press of absence. I wanted to ask something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. My phone vibrated, a message from her flashing briefly, but it was deleted before I could see it. A draft of a reply I didn't have courage to send sat there, unsent, hovering in digital space like an apology I hadn't given. I watched the empty seat she'd left behind. The rain started again outside, soft, almost polite, and I felt suspended, caught between hope and confusion, longing and withdrawal. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was 8:47 a.m. when I finally noticed her shadow stretching across the cafe floor, slipping in just as I was taking the first sip of black coffee. She carried her thermos, same as before, and that familiar rhythm. The careful way she folded her coat, the slight tilt of her head, made me feel at home in a way I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Morning, I said, voice quieter than usual but steady. Morning, she replied, settling into the seat across from me. Her eyes flicked to my cup, then back, just long enough to remind me she remembered, still, the smallest details. We talked about the gallery, about exhibitions, about things that didn't matter and things that did, but mostly we just existed in the same space, quietly attuned. No confessions, no grand declarations, no fevered attempts to define what we were. Just presence. After coffee, we walked to the park bench by the rain-streaked trees. The bench that had been witness to tentative glances, awkward pauses, and first brushes of touch now felt like hours. She adjusted her scarf, and I realized I was watching her, but not in longing, just noticing. Appreciating. Knowing she was there, and I was there too. We shared tea from the thermos, passing it back and forth, the steam curling in the cold morning air. Her fingers brushed mine as we poured, and it no longer startled me. Instead, it grounded me. Tiny gestures like this, the tilt of her head, the brush of her hand, the pause before she spoke, were the rhythm of our quiet understanding. She laughed softly at a pigeon skidding across a puddle. I laughed with her, the sound low and familiar. For the first time, the distance of years, the weight of all the things that had made our connection complicated, seemed ordinary, manageable. We didn't need to fill the silence with words. We just sat side by side, letting it stretch comfortably. I realized that this simple, imperfect, mundane was everything we had been building toward. The nearly confessions, the stolen touches, the rain, the black coffee, the thermos, the park bench, they weren't dramatic. They were ours. Finally, she leaned back, eyes half closed, a soft sigh escaping her lips. I reached out, lightly resting my hand over hers. No flerish, no announcement, just this small acknowledgement. Okay, she said softly. Same word as before, but heavier now, with familiarity, with trust. I smiled. Okay, I echoed. And in that moment, the world didn't shift dramatically. Life continued. Gallery work, coffee routines, errands rain late texts. But it was better. Not perfect, but ours. Grounded, warm, familia. I thought of all the times we'd almost crossed the line, all the moments that had made me pause, all the drafts of messages left unsent, and realized those pauses had been necessary. They had brought us here. As we sat on the bench, sipping tea, I looked at her and thought only she would notice that I always stir my coffee 3 times before taking a sip, and only she would care. And that was enough.